I mean, he lives in the gym for God's sake, so he's constantly training, right?
That's not a metaphor, by the way. His bed and toothbrush is at the gym.
He lives there. Period. End of story.
What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So Nick, one of our favorite fighters, Khamzat Chimaev, just continues to innovate with certain things he does. Obviously, we've all missed him inside the Octagon.
That's right.
He put on some incredible shows for us at the mid to end of 2020, and then obviously had his bout with COVID, which ended up being pretty serious and sidelined him for a little while. He's trying to make up for that now with what he's calling just a mega end-of-the-year extravaganza.
Yeah.
And this is where I find him to be so innovative. One, he's competing in two weight classes, 170 and 185. And because he's so strong and grappling heavy, and that's his style, he's able to contend at 185 while being physically smaller than a lot of people in that division. But what's so cool about that is it allows for much more activity.
Yeah.
For example, and I think he said in August, I want to fight at 170, and then at September, I want to turn around and fight at 185. Well, makes sense because there's no real need for a weight cut. You can fight and presumably you don't take any damage, which he hasn't in any of his fights.
Right.
You can turn around and fight 185 because as we see, quite often, it's not the damage inside the octagon that keeps you away for a long time. It's the fight camps and the weight cut, and then the extreme weight cut in some instances, fight week leading up to the fight. And so then so this kind of negates that. So it's 170 in August, 185 in September. Then he wants to take October to do another fight camp and get himself back down to 170 for a fight in November at 170 and then cap the year off at 185. So it's essentially 170, immediate turnaround, month off. 170, immediate turnaround at 185. And I thought it was a brilliant strategy and schedule that he laid out there.
Yeah, and I love that. You know, there's so many things that make Khamzat Chimaev a unique character in the sport. And one of the most intriguing things is that he's competing at two weight classes and seemingly doing really well. You know, everybody kind of lumps him into the title conversation at 170, but he's had more fights in the UFC at 185 than he has at 170. And I just personally love the experiment that they're kind of trying with him, because when you have a industry full of characters, you have to do something to make them a little different. And he does a good job with the broken English smash talk, the trash talk that he does. And
smash talk, I like that.
Yeah, smash talk. That'll be his podcast, I'm sure.
Yeah, that would be
later.
If he ever names a podcast that, he can thank the Barnhill brothers for it.
There you go. And I think that they should carry out this little shtick as long as they possibly can. Now, we understand if he wins, let's just say best case scenario, he fights 4 times this year, 2 at each weight class, and wins all of them. He is not only going to rise in the ranks at 170, he's going to rise at 185 as well, which is something you don't see. You generally find you'll find a guy's name in the rankings on multiple weight classes if they're pretty consistent with it. But if he's bouncing back and forth and month by month jumping back from weight class to weight class, he will be a top contender in there. And not only that, the UFC is pushing him a little bit. So a good win will push him a little bit further, and it might even what's the word? It might even push him in another weight class that if he wins at 185 in a great fashion against a great opponent, that might push him forward in the 170 division as well. And he didn't even have to do any heavy lifting in that division. So I think it's really interesting. I think there's tons of good matchups out there. And I feel like now that he's been out for a little while, there's going to be a few more sharks in the water that are going to smell that, and they're going to be like, okay, I think maybe he got gassed and his lingering effects from COVID might have something to do with it. But if there's any time to get over on Khamzat Chimaev, it's right now. So I think there's going to be some people that are going to throw their name in the hat. And who knows, it might work out for him, but it might not. And I really can't wait to see him back in the octagon. He's such an entertaining figure. And I personally believe that if they keep him on that schedule that he's asking for, that we're going to see him rise into superstardom just like we saw last year.
Yeah, and what the UFC is showing time and time again is they're realizing that, hey, you don't have to string together 20 fights, 25 fights before you can become a household name and, fight twice a year, 3 times a year, rinse and repeat type of thing until you work your way up the rankings. You can be in the single digits of fights like Khamzat was when he came to the UFC at 6-0, and you can go on this meteoric rise. And the UFC is realizing that there is a huge market for that. The story is intriguing. People want to see it. And somebody who's willing to fight whenever, wherever is a guy that not just the casuals, but the diehards and the UFC brass can get behind. And so one of the things that I think you're going to see is if he does get a marquee win at 170, that if a marquee fight fell out at 185, Dana would pick up the phone, or Sean Shelby, and they would call Khamzat first. Because if, you know, and vice versa, if he goes at 185 and beats a top fiver, why should his stock at 170 not rise?
Right.
Why should his ranking at 170 not rise? If he can demonstrate that he can beat, not to pick on Jared Cannonier, which is the first name that popped in my head, but go up and beat somebody like Jared Cannonier at 185, then why would you think that he couldn't necessarily do that to Jorge Masvidal or Neil Magny? So it makes sense to, it's like the rising tide rises all ships. And in this instance, Khamzat has 2 ships, the 170 ship and the 185 ship. And I am very glad, as a side note, that he's waited a little bit. I'm glad that he said August, because Khamzat, my only concern and criticism of him was that he kept overtraining while he was trying to battle the lingering effects of COVID. And then he had the retirement thing. I said, this guy might be on the brink of burning himself out, and he might be on the brink of causing some serious long-term medical problems, because he's his own worst enemy, and he can't just chill a little bit. So I love the schedule, and love it even more so that it starts in August, because that gives him enough time.
Yeah, that does. I mean, hopefully he's beyond all these lingering COVID effects, and he can move forward and train at the pace that he likes to maintain. I mean, he lives in the gym, for God's sake, so he's constantly training, right? That's
guys. Not a metaphor, by the way. His bed and toothbrush is at the gym.
He lives there. Period. End of story. So those types of guys. They're few and far between, but they are the toughest guys in all the gyms, and they quite literally live there, and they train there, and they don't ever stop. So when you tell somebody like that, hey, take your orders out of the water, we need you to sit down for a week, we need you to sit down for 2 weeks, they literally can't do it. So he has to look at the longevity and look at the long-term career that he is going to have in martial arts, and just say, okay, you know what is 2 weeks right now? I'm not going to, become a worse fighter. I'm not going to lose all of my power, all my skill if I just don't train for 2 weeks. But it could, if I push too hard, it could have some lasting effects that I may not be able to ever get over. Right. And then when I'm a grown man, I don't have quite as many unique stories to tell about how I was, such a pioneer and an innovator in the UFC and doing things that nobody's ever done before, and had a rise faster than almost anybody. There's a couple people, you can name them all on one hand, that have risen faster than Khamzat Chimaev. And
but I would say even there, that might be true, like somebody like a Conor McGregor or somebody like that, but nobody with a single-digit fight record going into the UFC. I don't think anybody's ever come into the UFC at 6-0, and there may be somebody out there in the archives. Brock Lesnar, that I just is escaping me right now. But I don't think there's really ever been somebody that's come in, not having had their 10th professional fight yet, and made this much noise in the biggest organization in the sport.
Yeah, and if Khamzat Chimaev wins his next fight, and then something happens where a fallout takes place, and a title fight or a number one contenders matchup happens, and they insert him, nobody's going to bat an eye and say, oh, that's not fair, he doesn't deserve it. Everybody knows his skills are comparable to all the people at the top of 170, and potentially, as long as size doesn't matter, his skills are comparable to everybody at the top of 185. So I think we're going to see some really special stuff out of Khamzat Chimaev this year. Yuri Prochazka what you said is a great point. Yuri had several fights, titles, was a
over
world
20
champion.
Fights.
20 fights before he even came over. And that's a super high level of experience that he brought over to the UFC, and it's really worked out for him. He's 2 fights in, and it looks like his next fight's going to be for the strap. So it worked out for him. I do think that Khamzat Chimaev is going to continue to rise, and I'm super excited. I don't know who they're going to give him yet. I really do hope.
I wish there was some more news, like juicy news we could announce as to who the opponents are. But I feel like just the schedule alone warrants a video, because that's a creative thing to do.
Yeah.
And not many people are that confident in their ability to cut weight, win a fight, say, I'm not going to take any damage, and then I'm going a weight class up. But when you're as good of a grappler and you have the type of strength and skill and confidence that Khamzat has, you can make bold claims like that. And thus far, he's 3 for 3 on his claims. So we got to just take him at his word.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, people say stuff like that. It's just bravado, tough guy talk, and you just brush it off and say, yeah, sure, you can. But he has actually proven it to us in all of his outings in the UFC. He hasn't taken any damage. So what makes us believe that he's going to start taking damage now and won't be able to maintain that schedule? I'm super looking forward to it, and we'll have to make another video soon speculating on who his opponents are going to be first at 170 and 185.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that one, guys. Thanks so much for watching this video, and if you've enjoyed the content, please give us a like, comment, and subscribe. We always love engaging with you guys in the comments. We get some great ones. We have some good debates there, and so we really appreciate that. Keep it coming. And guys, we're almost to 1,000 subscribers now. We didn't think it would happen this fast, but it's really because of you all, and we really appreciate you watching our videos. So until the next one, have a wonderful day.
Peace.